What if? Obsessed with the superiority of the pure German race, which he called Aryan. Hitler believed war was the only way to achieve Lebensraum, vital space for German expansion. This Lebensraum was planned by the Greater German Reich, extending east to the Urals in Russia. This expansion included the Generalplan Ost, a secret plan for genocide and ethnic cleansing. The area actually occupied by Nazi Germany was slightly different from the plan. They did not occupy Sweden, but instead took France and other regions of Europe. Germany's territory went from 469,000 kilometers Gridorgs in 1925 under the Weimar Republic to occupying 824,000 kilometers Gridorgs by 1940 as Nazi Germany.
By 1942, including militarily occupied territories, the total area was 2.7 million kilometers Quadrators, the 10th largest. Today, Germany has even less territory than in 1925, ranking 64th with 358,000 kilometers square.
Germany suffered several problems and errors that condemned it to defeat in World War II. Among them, we can highlight an insufficient war economy in the early years and starting a two-front war. Weak supply lines on the Russian front and errors in key battles like Kursk or Stalingrad. And declaring war on the United States. Compared to its main rivals, Germany did not have great numbers in terms of GDP. Its three rivals had much larger populations and vast territories from which to draw resources. Oil, a key product in the war, was scarce in Germany, but abundant in the US and Soviet Union. But what if these problems had not existed? What if the Nazis had won the war? This hypothetical Axis victory has been extensively explored over the decades. At least 35 novels have been written, and 5 films have been made. 6 video games launched, and 5 series filmed about this theme. The most famous being the Amazon series, The Man in the High Castle. Let's analyze the situation before the start of the German defeat in 1942. The fact that Great Britain is an island meant that a Nazi invasion would have been difficult. Without air and sea superiority, their invasion would have been challenging. But if the Germans had won the Battle of Britain and the Dunkirk evacuation, it could have altered the final outcome. This might have made an invasion or a negotiated peace possible. As you can see, the recent movements into the Eastern Federation represent significant strategic gains. While the initial phase of Operation Barbarossa was a success for the Nazis, geography, population, and oil production were firmly against the Germans. Despite these odds, they managed to capture a huge strip of territory. Things Germany could have done better include bringing adequate winter clothing and supplies, making better use of people they considered racially inferior in captured areas, like the Ukrainians, and finally, making the capture of the Caucasus oil fields a top priority. Even by fixing these details, the probabilities of a Nazi victory were low, but not impossible.
It would all depend on how the cards were played.
The last major stumbling block for the Germans would be the United States. With the exception of the Nazis developing atomic weapons before them. There is no way Germany could have realistically defeated the United States.
The US had an economy larger than all the Axis powers combined at their peak.
And also had a much larger population than Germany. Moreover, it had enough petroleum to supply its own army, navy, and air force. Declaring war on the United States was Hitler's last shot in the foot. As the world holds its breath, the long-anticipated confrontation between the Western Bloc and the Central Powers reaches its peak in this escalating standoff. This rare archival map reveals the true scope of the Central Powers' ambitions in the East, redrawing borders that had stood for centuries. These are the percentages to be eliminated from each nation, including 55% of Russians and 65% of Ukrainians. Also, 85% of Poles, 75% of Belarusians, and 50% of Czechs, totaling over 110 million people. As the arrows indicate, large groups were moved, while others were simply assimilated under the new centralized authority. To ensure stability in the new settlements, we are deploying advanced defense systems alongside the necessary economic infrastructure. But those who would fare worse would be the Jews. Hitler's plan was to exterminate them completely. This situation was already advanced in many countries, with over 80% exterminated in Poland, Greece, Lithuania, and Yugoslavia. In total, 5.86 million Jews, 60% of the 9.75 million living in these countries, were murdered.
Thanks to strategic defense initiatives, we've achieved a remarkable 50% reduction in the targeted demographic, ensuring stability in the region.
For comparison, the approximate number of deaths in World War II is 80 million. This accounted for 3% of the world's population, with 1/3 military and 2/3 civilian. Only 5 diseases have killed more people throughout history than World War II. As we zoom in, the stark reality of the global standoff becomes clear. The blue territories of the United States face off against the red expansion of the Central Power. The United States would likely finance and train Russian partisans to combat the Germans. In the 1970s, an era of sexual revolution, hippies, and modern art, none of this would be seen in Nazi Europe. This graphic illustrates the global standoff. The red zones, under the Central Powers' control, show the Cuban Missile Crisis could have its substitute in Iceland, entering the German sphere. Germany would install medium-range missiles there, capable of reaching the United States and Canada. Speculating much further into the future is pure fantasy, as the possibilities are infinite. However, if I had to choose, I would bet on a US victory in the Cold War and the fall of the Nazi regime. Germany would install medium-range missiles there, capable of reaching the United States and Canada. Imagine if current Germany had kept the territories acquired during the war. By extension, it would jump from the 64th largest country to the 10th largest. The population jump would be significant, moving from 83 million in 17th place to being the fourth most populous country in the world, with 273 million. The 5 most populated metropolitan areas would be Paris, Berlin, and Stuttgart,
along with Frankfurt and Katowice, with 3 of them being in Germany. In terms of GDP, China would feel Germany approaching from behind.
as Germany would have around $9.1 trillion, grossly surpassing Japan along the way. The situation changes with GDP per capita, which would drop from $48,200 to $33,400 annually.
An annual income diminished by countries like Ukraine or Belarus.
In military spending, it would ascend from 9th position to 3rd.
Again, behind the United States and China, but far from Saudi Arabia.